I'd like to introduce John Nissen, the chairman of AMEG, and he will go into the details of what we've determined.
Hello. This is the most important day of my life. As chair of AMEG, I'm presenting new information, observation and theory, too new to be in the IPCC reports. So this will be news to many of you, probably most of you, or all of you, because some of the important theories, some of them are very relevant to the situation. Climate change is happening now. It's the weird weather that you've been exhibited all over the northern hemisphere. And it's about to get far worse. The abrupt climate change the world has been observing recently is due to Arctic warming. The Arctic has been warming much faster than the rest of the planet. If the Arctic continues to warm, things will get worse, and we'll end up with that situation described in the New York Times here, when the planet will become uninhabitable, I'm afraid. So that's happening now, and we've got to stop it. So what's going on? Well, the Arctic has started a vicious cycle of warming and melting. This is the start of a runaway meltdown of the whole of the Arctic ice cap. It has to be stopped. AMEG believes that it can be stopped by cooling the Arctic quickly, and we have some top engineers advising us on how that can be done. The public is not being told the truth about Arctic meltdown. Governments are doing nothing to stop Arctic meltdown. This is why I'm giving this press conference. We need action. I'm a scientist and an engineer. I'm educated as a scientist and did engineering and went into computer systems. And I look at the planet and I marvel at how the Earth system has kept the planet suitable for life for around 2 billion years, but with a few major extinction events to force evolution along. Then, for the past 2.5 million years, the Earth system has caused temperature, climate, and sea levels to go up and down like a yo-yo during the ice ages. And that's forced the rapid evolution of Homo sapiens. Then, for the last 8,000 years, we've had amazing stability with constant temperature, sea level, weather, and apart from a few blips like the medieval cold period. So this stability has allowed the development of agriculture, civilization, industrialization, and a population of 7 billion and rising. This apparent stability is entirely a fluke. It is by amazing good luck that we are here today looking back on the past. The sea ice is disappearing in a vicious spiral of warming and melting, which a lot of experts are hesitant about admitting. But Peter Wadhams and I are convinced about it. We've done the engineering calculations to show that this is actually what's happening. As the sea ice retreats, open water is exposed. Sunshine penetrates through fresh water on the surface into the heavy saline water below. The heat is stored through the Arctic winter with the ice above like a night storage heater. Then the next year, this heat melts the ice a bit faster. And this explains why we have a vicious spiral of warming and melting. Peter Wadhams agrees. He's made careful measurements of sea ice thickness in a number of submarine journeys spanning several decades. He observed a remarkable decline in sea ice thickness, and it seemed to be an accelerating decline. At a recent Royal Society event, he presented an analysis of all the measurements showing an exponential decline. This is the reality. Don't believe the models. This is the reality. You can see it from this graph. Even the child can understand that that is plunging, that curve of the observations. And this is not from this year, but it's showing that next year might be September when it gets to zero. And what does that mean when it gets to zero? It means there's no sea ice cover over the Arctic Ocean. And we call that a blue ocean event. That's quite a nice image, isn't it? You look out over the ocean and it's all open water. Yes, and now, This blue event is coming fast. It could, it could even be next year. Well, let's hope it isn't. There's already an escalation in lots of things as a result of the warming that's going on. And that's an escalation, it's an acceleration, exponential effects. There's rapid emission of methane, which you can see on the right there. There's substantial loss in Greenland with exponential rise in sea level, which you can see on the left. And there's a disruption of jet stream behavior with abrupt climate change. This is the weird weather, and it's leading to crop failures. It's leading to rising food prices. That's a graph showing the rising food prices, and it's showing conflict. And the conflict are all those unrest in Egypt and Syria and Uganda and Mozambique. There's a whole list of them on there, and it's very significant. Right, nobody's promoting effective action to prevent the Arctic tipping into a new ice-free state. Nobody's slamming on the reverse gear or whatever to avoid disaster. We are busy arranging the chairs on the deck. We all dread this blue ocean event, and it could be as early as September 2015. So I believe that soon after this event, there will be big changes in the atmospheric circulation and ocean currents, locking the Arctic into a sea ice-free state. So it will stay sea ice free of sea ice. And then all hell will let loose. We're seeing the Earth system doing what it has done in the past, when it produced great meltwater pulses. Rapid warming in the Arctic melted the ice sheets. The sea level rose at 5 centimeters per year. That is about 1 meter in 20 years. Can you imagine the effect for all those islands, low-lying countries, and conurbations by the sea? It is catastrophic. Then there is complete chaos in the weather. Now, this is the standard thing. You've got 3 bands of weather systems in the northern hemisphere. We've got the trade winds, which are easterlies, and then above that you've got westerlies, and then at the North Pole you've got easterlies again. Now, if you start warming the North Pole enough, you get rid of that whole circulation at the North Pole. The westerlies stretch up right up to the North Pole. That's a complete change of climate. Much different, much more severe than anything we've dreamt of happening.
And do you think civilization could survive a 50 gigaton release of methane?
No, I don't think it can. I think that if you look at the existing predictions of global warming rates, what's kind of eerie is the fact that the business as usual projections, even the cautious ones produced by IPCC, are still giving us about 4 degrees of warming by the end of the century, and with 2 degrees has been taken arbitrarily as the level beyond which nasty things happen. I don't know why it's 2 degrees, but that will be reached by the middle of the century, and 4 degrees by the end of the century. Now, 4 degrees, people who've calculated what that would do to food production, to die-off of forests, to acceleration of warming due to various extra feedbacks that kick in, that the general conclusion is pretty dire, that if you get to 4 degrees of warming, then collapse of civilization is what's going to happen, because the world won't be able to sustain anywhere near its present population. So the result will be chaos and warfare. So that's just that. The eerie thing is that that's predicted by the IPCC report, but the projection of warming by the end of the century is 4 degrees. But nowhere do they state at all that 4 degrees is a catastrophe for economically and socially for the planet. And now with this Arctic methane, you're simply adding another element to the warming, even if it's only an extra 0.6. That brings forward the date at which catastrophic warming is achieved by maybe 20 years.
As you've already heard from Peter Wadhams, there is a time bomb sitting there, and one of the only ways to kind of reduce the chance of that going off is to cool the Arctic. We can send men to the moon, and we can put a lander on a comet the other day. We can observe what's happening to our planet from space, and we get a good perspective and think of it from outside. Now it is up to us humans to use our intelligence and technology to restore the old norm of constant climate and sea level to our planet. We can do it. Of course we can do it, but only if we act quickly and decisively. In the words of Winston Churchill, I'm sure you recognize him, owing to past neglect, in the face of plainest warnings, we have entered upon a period of danger. The area of procrastination is coming to its close. In its place, we are entering a period of consequences. We cannot avoid this period. We're in it now, and we are in it now. Well, fortunately, AMEG has one of the most reassuring people I know. He's a brilliant, absolutely brilliant engineer called Stephen Salter, and he's invented a system for spraying salt into the atmosphere, and the droplets evaporate to produce microscopic salt crystals which are wafted into the sky through natural circulation of the air. These crystals then act to brighten the clouds, cloud condensation nuclei, for those of you with the science. When you brighten the cloud, the surface underneath the cloud is darkened and cooled. So the Atlantic Ocean, where we would put these things, is cooled by having these clouds. And he reckons that with 200 ships, he could produce enough cooling power to counter the warming effect that's going on in the Arctic. And he is just brilliant, simply brilliant. The idea is to put these ships in the Arctic, because the Arctic was warmed originally from the Gulf Stream warming, and global warming warming the Gulf Stream even more. Now, the fossil fuel companies don't really want the Arctic cooled, so they're very happy when people say, oh, geoengineering is dangerous. Actually, there's very little dangerous about this at all. It's very benign. It's like spray from the seashore. What we need is leadership and the setting up of an international task force specifically mandated to ensure that the Arctic is cooled as quickly and safely as possible. The good news is that this cooling is quite feasible, and it's surprisingly cheap, less than $1 billion a year, and it can be done using cloud cooling techniques. There are alternatives to the cloud cooling one, which are a little bit more expensive. Now, billions of dollars are being pledged to poorer countries to allow them to adapt to climate change. But wouldn't they prefer if the climate change didn't happen? Wouldn't they prefer it if the meters of sea level rise didn't happen? Wouldn't they prefer to see money spent on prevention rather than adaptation, et cetera, et cetera? What is sensible use of our money? Yet, we're not being given a choice. We're not being told that this is the way to avoid growing misery and bloodshed around the world by the simple expedient of cooling the Arctic. Why not? Is it because the climate experts are so focused on the emissions reductions that they're not seeing the bigger picture? I wonder. Anyhow, yesterday I went round asking all sorts of people what they thought about the Arctic situation as I described it. People were obviously shocked, deeply shocked. But one person was not shocked. He told me something that shocked me, I have to tell you, because I came to Lima to tell the truth. They, and this is what he said, they, and I don't know who they are, do know what's going on. They do know that the sea ice is disappearing very rapidly. They do not want geoengineering to cool the Arctic. They do know that geoengineering would work. but they are only too happy when people talk about geoengineering as being too dangerous. They don't care about what happens to the planet if the sea ice disappears. That is exactly what they want to happen. Do these people understand what's going on? By letting the sea ice disappear, they're creating misery for themselves, their children, their stakeholders, the whole world. It'll become a matter of life and death. They are being unbelievably stupid. But let us put this behind us. We don't want to make enemies. We need everybody behind this effort to cool the Arctic before it's too late. We want the fossil fuel industry behind us. It has skills for dealing with the Arctic. We want the modelers who can help to target the interventions and check the effects of the interventions. And we want the IPCC, who people trust for dealing with the CO2 problems, which incidentally require quite different intervention from what we're proposing for the Arctic. Cooling the Arctic is going to be quite simple if it's just ships but we might have to do other things as well because we're running out of time. And we have to do things that a lot of you think are very unpleasant, like putting sulfate aerosols into the stratosphere. Now, I know that's very unpleasant, but if your child is dying and the only way of treatment is to give some unpleasantly tasting medicine, you give the medicine, don't you? So we must all be behind this emotionally. We must encourage the people who are actually doing the work. The Arctic sea ice disappearance presents an existential threat to civilization. That's making the planet uninhabitable. And that's far more immediate threat than the threat from CO2 emissions, which is a long-term threat. This fact about the sea ice is conspicuously absent from the IPCC AR5 reports. And Peter Wadhams and others think this is scandalous. The AR5 assessment does not even have a diagram to show the precipitous decline in September sea ice. Sea ice could disappear at the end of summer as soon as next September. At that point, further warming of the Arctic, sea level rise, methane release in that time bomb, and abrupt climate change could become unstoppable. The fuse will have been lit and will be going off very quickly. We consider it an absolute scandal, as I said, that IPCC says nothing about the greatest threat to humanity since civilization began. I'll say that again. We consider it an absolute scandal that IPCC says nothing about the greatest threat to humanity since civilization began. It is now so late in the day that only drastic intervention with geoengineering techniques have any chance to save the sea ice and prevent an unstoppable descent into total Arctic meltdown, climate chaos, methane time bomb going off, etc. But this is a call for collaboration from everybody who can help avert this catastrophe, to avoid us passing the point of no return, the blue ocean event that could be happening any year. So we've got to really get a move on. This could be the greatest collaborative venture of all time, where everybody in the world wants the same result. This can be a turning point in history. Let's make it happen. There is a way to avoid the growing misery, starvation, economic collapse, and bloodshed that we're seeing already growing around the world by the simple expedient of cooling the Arctic. Let us be clear that the choice we make now, whether or not to act quickly, decisively, and with determination to cool the Arctic, is a matter of life or death for our grandchildren. This is AMEG's message. This is why I've come to Lima to tell you. Please make my trip to Lima worthwhile. Thank you.